Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Patrick Dunn, who is no stranger to bridging the gap between technical and non-technical teams. We'll explore how he translates requirements, resolves misunderstandings, and helps both sides achieve the true alignment on complex projects. Patrick will also share his tips for improving communication, managing nerves, and speaking effectively in high stakes situations. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Patrick.
Thank you. My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. First question. When did you first realize you were often acting as the bridge between technical and non-technical teams?
Probably early on in my career. Just as a bit of a background, my degree back in the Stone Ages is from the University of Maine in environmental science. And I was a park ranger for a number of years, so I've always been that kind of that storyteller and talking to people. Then when I changed careers to go into IT in the early 90s, I didn't have that. I went back to school, got a certificate in computer electronics, and just worked my way up from there. But I was always that person since I was always asking the questions from a business point of view because I didn't have that techie understanding. And it just developed from there. And over 30 years, I was wound up working global teams, working with Fortune 100 companies, working directly with the C-level executives, some of the best well-known names in the world. And they didn't know what they didn't know, and IT folks didn't know what they didn't know, and they would ask me to go to the IT department or a programmer and say, explain this to me so we can get our product out the door quicker. And IT would, and it was always like business speaks and outcomes, techie speaks and constraints, and just going from there and just translating back and forth.
I'm curious, Patrick, what prompted the change from being a park ranger to IT?
All about the dollar signs. Back in, be perfectly honest, back in the 90s, I mean, I was a law enforcement park ranger as well as an interpretive park ranger, and I wasn't making all that much money at a government salary. I got tired of being laid off every October 1st when there was a budget crisis. So I kind of eased my way out of it. I did a couple of years for nonprofits, and then decided to go back to school where a lot of friends of mine were going back and getting a certificate. At that point in time, it was more like a second degree. They didn't have a lot of computer science degrees back then. And so I just wound up carrying a tool bag initially and then just working my way up through the ranks. And I think when I left the Park Service to go into the private sector, I think my salary tripled.
Oh wow, that definitely was a good motivator, I would think.
And I got benefits too. So that was the other part. I mean, being young, you don't care so much about benefits, but when you start getting married and having kids, it makes a difference.
Yeah, I would assume so. What were the biggest differences you noticed in how each side defined success or progress on a project?
So a lot of times on business always looks at it, as I said before, in outcomes, is it revenue, risk, time, reputation. And then with technology, they speak in constraint, latency, reliability, security, scalability. And when you're talking to a business leader, a lot of times those are just words, especially if they don't have a technical background. It just kind of goes over their head. And then when you're talking to the tech side, they don't understand the business requirements at all because they've been, and nowadays it's more prevalent than there ever was before, where they're trained in AI or they're trained in cybersecurity, but they don't have that common sense business ground. So where I come into play, and I've always come into play, is as I said, being that translator. So there are a lot of technical folks, and no offense to those that are listening or to yourself, that you just want to slide food under the door to them. They're great at their job, but you don't want them interfacing with the client or with business. But they do such a great job programming or doing the networking aspect. They're great at that, but you need to have that rationalization where they're just got to realize that they're both optimizing, but it's just different variables between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. We certainly do enjoy a pizza.
Oh, I've always that. I think when I worked in a data center, I think I had a stash of beer underneath the floorboards.
Yeah, pizza and beer, that's a great combo for sure. Oh yes, us technical people, we're a delightful bunch. When
Always in for free food.
Yeah, 100%, man. I remember I worked at a company and at the beginning of every month, they'd bring in a big cake to celebrate all the birthdays for that
Yep.
month, and I made sure to get in early that day.
I remember too distinctly being in business offices too, where all the business teams be together and then they'd leave the leftover food out, and it was always the IT people that we'd always go in and grab the leftover sandwiches, chips or whatever, and it's like, yeah, just leave it in the break room or on a table somewhere. It'd be gone within 30 minutes.
You're damn right. Ain't nothing going to waste. Ain't nothing going to waste, man.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I don't got to bring lunch today. All right. They're having a staff meeting. I love that. Executive meeting. Are you kidding me? Absolutely. All right. So, what requirements came from non-technical stakeholders, or when requirements came from non-technical stakeholders, what kinds of assumptions do you find yourself having to clarify before technical work could begin?
Yeah, from on the business side, I mean, when business says make it faster, I want something done, make it fast and make everything work faster. On the technology side, it means I translated that depending on the situation to reduce the load time from X to Y or for the top user journey. You translated it into exactly what they needed. Or this, the CEO may say it needs to scale. So then you go over to the techies and you say, okay, we need to handle XYZ concurrent users with less than a 1% error rate or something along those lines. Or we need it secure. And then you need to know, and the IT side needs to know what you need to understand. What threats do we need to defend against? What's the acceptable risk levels? So the last part of my career was always working in the crisis management side or working with disaster recovery, technology, operational resiliency. So I constantly walked both worlds because I was working on the business side and with clients, and then going back to the technology teams to figure out why something was broken, or I'd be on an outage call, and you'd hear the two sides screaming at one another, and they were both saying the same thing but in different ways, and no one was understanding that. So there were a lot of times, and my boss used to say, "Patrick, use your radio voice, your Barry White voice," and you just kind of deepen it down, soften the tone. And I can remember one outage in particular where it was, I think, midnight. I was brought in late into the game, been screaming at each other for hours, and it was a critical outage. I can't remember what the outage particularly was, but it was a simple fix. And I just said, okay, everybody calm down. So first I went to the business side. What is the issue? And I went to the technology side. It's like, how do we fix this? And we just said, and they would say X, Y, Z. And I said, well, how does this translate? What does this mean? It means I'd force the technology folks to think a little bit more. And then at the same time, the business side, yeah, that's what I need. Back and forth. Then I think within that 4 hour outage call, when I came on, we had it resolved within half an hour.
Nice. That's excellent. And if you were using a Barry White voice, you had to get pretty low for that one. That's for sure.
I had to dig down for that.
100%. Yeah. Okay. So, how did you decide what level of technical detail to share with non-technical audiences without overwhelming them?
Good question. Again, they don't need to know all the nuts and bolts. They don't need to know exactly what the constraints are from a technology side. They don't need to know the what ports they're using or what constraints. They just business side just needs to know how it works. It's like, okay, I don't want to say dumb it down, but I would make it into high level concepts. Again, I would see a technology diagram. Even there are a lot of the technology diagrams that I would see, I'd be lost within 5 minutes of looking at it. I'd look at it and stare at it. This doesn't make sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense to me, I can't translate it to the business side. So before I go to the business side, I'd ask all the questions up front. It's like, what does this mean? How do we fix this? What does it mean in real terms? It's well, we've reduced capacity by 15%. What does that mean? How does that impact the number of users that we have? How does that impact performance? Because on the business side, they all want to know is like, what can we have our users finish a transaction in 30 seconds or less? And the IT side, well, we have so many latency issues. We have to do this. Like, business doesn't care about that. They just wanted to get the problem fixed. So we'd go back and forth on that a little bit. So I know the answers to the questions before I went to the business side when I brought the two together. So I'm the type of person, as I said, I like to know the answers to the questions before I ask them. So it's kind of like where I find a way to bypass it. It's kind of like my Kobayashi Maru test.
Yeah, I think a lot of us technical people, we assume that what we think is important is what is important to other people, and we need to recognize that without the business side, there is no technical side because we could develop something, but if the salespeople aren't able to sell it, well, then we're all out of a job. So you just telling me that you're able to increase a number by 50 consumption by or increase a number by 50%. Well, to a technical person, that might sound like a big deal, but to a non-technical person, a person in the business realm, well, they're the ones that have to communicate to outside people
Yeah.
why this matters because the outside person they definitely don't know why it matters. So and again, if you're not able to convince the people to buy, well, now we're all getting pink slips.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a common topic from business is I want it cheaper, faster, and safer. It's like you got to pick two. If you want it cheaper, it's not going to be fast or safe. If you want it faster, and there's always a cost to it. And usually at some point in time, if it's over-engineered, it may cost $10 million as opposed. Let's find a middle ground. Let's make it cost a million. What can you do with $1 million? I'm just using rough numbers, but you got to come out with a middle ground somewhere, and that's where it's really important to have that communication. You have to understand what the outcome is going to be more than anything else from the business side and from the technology side. So when the business side says, I want to have X, Y, Z, they need to understand it's like if you want it so fast that it's going to be instantaneous, that's going to cost you some money, especially if data centers are halfway across the world from one another and you don't have the resiliency or redundancy built in. So I see a lot of companies that want a lot of businesses, and especially in the Fortune 100, they want to have everything instantaneously, or they want to skip out on disaster recovery, for example. And I say, you can't do that. If you have an outage, you're going to get screwed. So you want to be able to recover within a reasonable amount of time. And I think if you have a major outage, most people, even the consumers, are fairly understanding that if you're down for 15 or 20 minutes or even an hour, if recovery time objective is an hour, great. But putting in the unreasonable recovery point objectives, recovery time objectives, that's a recipe for failure right there. Unless you're in a regulated industry, and then you have to make some sacrifices along the way as well.
Indeed. As you gained more experience, what signals helped or told you that both sides were truly aligned, not just agreeing in the moment?
When you'd have to wait about 15 to 20 minutes or even a day at times. You go back, and when I go back to talk to the technology teams, whether it be the security team or the networking team, and they truly understood what the message was. So I'd go back in and say, did you understand what the business side was asking for? And sometimes they say, not quite sure. And then I say, why didn't you ask that question? And they say, I don't know. I didn't think of it at the time. So it's like, okay, let's go back. But if they truly understood it, it's like, okay, we're on it. We're able to do this. And it's not going to cost us any additional money. We're able to get this fixed. But you got to have a project plan. And if they put it into the project plan, it's as an easy one and done. If you're aligned, because I was always on combined teams with both business and IT, and a lot of times there was miscommunication. But you have to ask the right questions, or ask, even if it's not the right question, ask it, and then get the answer, and keep asking the question. So you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of times I've even missed things along the way. And it's like, I forgot to ask this question. It's like, wow, I didn't think of that. And I go back to some of the technology teams and they'd ask me, it's like, oh, I didn't think of that. And then and same thing on the business side. And it's like, well, I know it was demanding and what can we do? I said, well, then it was, and it usually always it always evolved around money. That's where a lot of the disagreements and where the discrepancies came in was about money. You can give it to an engineer to design something, and they will engineer the hell out of it, and they will make it the best thing since sliced bread. But you may not need a Ferrari. You may just need a Ford Fusion, depending on the need. So when they're both aligned, I'd always go in and say, the last company I worked for was t-shirt size. What t-shirt size do we need? It's small, medium, or large. And that was the easiest way to define something. So you got to put it in terms initially of what both sides understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to asking questions, you have to have the confidence to do so. So a lot of times, a lot of miscommunication, I think, happens because there were questions that other people had, but they didn't have the confidence to ask the question at the time because they were worried about being seen as incompetent at that time. And I think that really can mess up a whole lot of projects if you don't have if you're looking around and you're waiting for someone else to kind of start that question asking part, but you're not comfortable being the person to start it, and the next person's not being comfortable and the next person's not comfortable, well, then no questions get asked and people assume that everyone understands, and then
Exactly.
nothing is understood, and then you see a whole bunch of problems happen.
Yeah, that comes with experience too. I know early in my career, I was afraid to answer the questions. Like you said, I didn't want to be perceived as, oh, this is the new guy. He's just trying to spread his wings a little bit, or he doesn't know what he's doing. But if you don't ask, you're not going to get the answer. So again, as I got older and more ingrained in my roles, it's like, yeah, you've got to ask the questions. And I've always encouraged that to everyone because I've been a mentor in a lot of the organizations that I've been in. It's like, ask the questions. If you don't know, raise your hand, say, I don't know. Can you explain this in a different way? It's like, help my three favorite words, help me understand. I learned that when I was with Gemini. It's like, help me understand why you need it this way. And once you started going down that path, the questions just started coming naturally.
What do you think an organization can do to make people comfortable asking questions?
It comes from the top down. You've got to have a leader, an executive who's willing to he himself or she or herself has to ask the questions if they don't understand. When they see somebody else asking questions to help them understand, it makes it easier and just have that open door policy. I know, and don't criticize people for asking the questions. I've been in a lot of organizations that afterwards I would be in a meeting with my director and he said, "Why did you ask that question?" Because I didn't know. I said, "Well, why didn't you know?" It's like I was just in a different situation or it wasn't asked the right way, but don't ever be afraid to ask questions. And that's what I've grown up being never afraid to ask is questions, except maybe the first week on the job. Then you're just kind of sitting back and listening, taking it all in. But once you're there for a week or two, don't be afraid of being the new guy and asking the questions. You bring a different perspective. And a lot of companies where you have employees that have been there for 30, 40 years at times, yeah, they just go, this is the way it's always been done. And they don't ask the questions. They may think that they know, but they don't. And when the new guy comes in, they're coming in from a whole different perspective, and they need to ask, and they ask those questions. So that again is putting the culture in place where you're not penalized for asking a question or demoted for asking a question. Just and it's from the top down, and they're even at top down leadership when that happens. There are some supervisors or managers that still don't want you to ask the questions, and then you still ask them. If it keeps continuing, maybe you're in the wrong role. Maybe you're in the wrong company. Don't be afraid to go in a different direction. Again, as I tell people in other roles, it's like your why changes over time. So you may be maybe the greatest thing in IT, but maybe your why has changed and you're burnt out doing that, and you just say, I don't need to ask these questions anymore. That's when you got to take a look deep inside yourself. Say, am I in the right role?
Yeah. I fully agree with you, Patrick. And company can certainly do what you're suggesting, and it gets me so demoralizing if you are someone who is confident asking questions, but when you do so, you have other people saying, well, why did you ask that question? And it says, well, I didn't know. And it's just like you said, I didn't know. Well, why didn't you know? Now you're starting to question your own competence because,
Yeah.
well, maybe I should have known because this person thinks I should have known. Well, maybe you're right. Maybe, well, then maybe I'm not in the right role, and then next thing you know, you're out.
Yeah.
And you're
When you start questioning yourself like that, you start spiraling very, very quickly. I know I've been in that situation before. It's like you started questioning yourself, even though you have all the experience in the world, and you get a person that's been at that company for 20 years and they're used to doing things a certain way, and they keep questioning why. And it's like, because I mean, it's just based on my experience in other organizations. Some organizations don't want to have the outside views.
Yeah, why? Because I said so. You definitely don't want to
Yeah.
be, you don't want to be at that company for sure.
No, then I always reply, so based on my experience, you brought me in here for a reason. I mean, that's how I've always, in the latter part of my career, it's like you brought me in here for a reason to help right the ship, or you brought me in to fix this problem. It's like if you're going to constantly question me for asking the questions, then why did you bring me in?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a more than fair question to ask. So for the people who are listening or watching our conversation, Patrick, and they may find themselves in a role similar to yours, where they are the translator between technical and non-technical teams, and they want to get as good at it as they possibly can. What do you think their approach should be to do that?
Yeah, ask the questions. Don't be continue to learn. I mean, the approach that I've always taken is continuous learning. Learn on both sides of the fence. Learn the business side. Learn the IT side as best you can. And there are some things you're not going to be the expert in everything. But if you continue to walk that role, you will learn where the bodies are buried, as I like to say. So on the business side, you'll know where the bodies are buried. You know where to go look for things. On the IT side, I learned to know where to go for things. So you become that valuable person that you know where to go on the business side, you know where to go on the IT side, and you're able to steer people in the right direction. So that's to me, that's the biggest thing you can learn is or do is ask the questions, continuous learning, find a mentor. That's another big one. Find a mentor within your organization or outside of your organization, but learn to ask the questions and don't be afraid to go out and look, volunteer. I mean, I've always been one to volunteer for new projects. Because you never know where you're going to pick up something.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a great conversation, Patrick. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Oh, my pleasure.
How can people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me through my website, www.paxatera.global, Paxaterra dot global, or just find me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that marks the another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you. Bye.